I'm Michael Bain, and welcome to Triggered, coming to you from, of course, the secret hidden bunker in the Rocky Mountains and Dragon House Studios, high in the Rocky Mountains, where hopefully we're upwind from the fallout pattern, just in case Denver gets nuked. Today we're going to talk about what was the biggest firearms release for 2021, and that is Ruger's release of the new Marlin lever gun, the 1895 SBL in 4570. First, I want to tell you a little bit about why that's important. This gun was, of course, introduced just end of last year. A lot of people got it for Christmas, and they were very lucky people. But when Remington went bankrupt and was pieced out, that is, all the pieces of Remington were sold to different buyers, Ruger bought Marlin. Now, Marlin is one of the oldest firearms imprimaturs in the United States. It's been going since essentially just after the Civil War. It has been a very successful company in the manufacture of lever action rifles. And the reason this is an important launch is that, number one, lever action rifles are going through an incredible renaissance. As I mentioned to you when I was at the SHOT Show, I spoke to people who are either importing or manufacturing lever action rifles, and every one of them, to a person, told me they can't keep them in stock. Second thing, Marlin is a beloved imprimatur. People who own Marlins are really genuinely fanatics about owning those guns. And ask me how I know that. I own maybe half a dozen myself. The third thing is that when Ruger decided to bring out a Marlin lever gun, it essentially turned the eyes of the gun culture on Ruger with one single question: can you do it right? Because lever guns are hard to do right. One of the things we've talked about here on Triggered over the years is when we see manufacturing products that were designed Civil War forward in the early 1900s, those products were designed in a different world than we live in now. They were designed when handwork was cheap. Lots of people around who could do precision handwork, but machines were expensive, and they were evolving very quickly. So you'd buy one, you'd have to buy another one. So we see in a lot of guns that were designed end of the 19th century, early in the 20th century, say 1911, that were designed to be fitted by hand, put together by hand, as opposed to modern manufacturing. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the next segment. But everybody wanted to see if Ruger would screw up. It's like watching one of those car races. You're waiting to see if one of those cars skids off the track. I am happy to tell you that Ruger, in fact, did not screw up. That Ruger, in fact, created the best out-of-the-box lever-action rifle I have ever handled, I have ever used. And I have extensive experience with all the different brands of lever guns. I was lucky enough to be able to take this gun hunting early on. We went out to West Texas, end of last year. We've talked about that. You saw it on Shooting Gallery. A couple of episodes ago on Shooting Gallery on the Outdoor Channel. You'll see it in repeat, of course, I think next month. We went mule deer hunting with this rifle fitted with a loophole scope, because ultimately you can send me a rifle, or you can send a reviewer a rifle and they can fire 100 rounds, 1,000 rounds, whatever. But in the end, a gun is decided at how it functions in the field. Does it do what it should do? And this gun does everything that it needs to do. We've got lots more when Triggered returns. Okay, let's talk about the specs very quickly. What we have here is a forged receiver. Interesting thing about this, I've read on the internet that this is a cast receiver. It's not, it's forged. Not only is it forged, but it's heat treated before it's machined. Why would you do that? Well, heat treating sometimes can change internally some of the specifications. So you machine a gun, you heat treat it, those specs might change. Ruger, on the other hand, decided to heat treat, then machine, which is harder, but it gives you a more precise gun. The barrel, I've heard on the internet that this barrel is MIM, metal machine molded. It's not. It's a hammer forged barrel. Literally the best way to make a barrel in the entire world, right? You've got some options on sighting, as you can see here. This is a fully adjustable peep sight fitted with a high-vis light tube front sight. Because it's a long Picatinny rail, you have the option, obviously you can stay with your peep sight here. You can go with a standard mount scope. You may have to remove the peep sight, by the way. I did, to go ahead and put the Leupold scope on it that I hunted with. You can take the peep off, drop a scope in a standard position, or should you choose, you can go to a longer eye relief scout type scope. You're familiar with those. We've talked about it a lot here. An excellent choice on that, if you could find one, would be the now discontinued Leupold 1.5 to 5X illuminated. Be careful, there are a lot of counterfeits of those scopes out there on the internet. You'll see that what we have here, it's a gray laminated stock. It's very, very well done. It is laser engraved checkering, but it's good laser engraved checkering. It feels good, it grips the hand. You've got the slightly larger lever. The reason that Ruger opted to do that was people hunting the cold. In fact, some of the hunting I did with this rifle, I did with gloves on. I was glad to have the slightly larger lever. Ruger also did some things that make a lot of sense for modern shooters. You'll notice the barrel itself is threaded. You can thread a suppressor on this, and heaven knows if the 4570 drives you that crazy, I suppose you could put a muzzle brake on it. But it's already set up for a suppressor if you would like. Another thing that Ruger did is it slimmed down the fore end, and you'll see that a little bit better in the next segment. But one of the engineers, one of the heads at Ruger told me, he said, you know what's funny is when we got Marlin, we knew what we needed to change. It's like, well, how did you know what you needed to change? He goes, because people like you, people like Richard Mann, people like Jon Snow, people like Andy Larson from Skinner Sights have been writing about what pissed them off about Marlin lever action rifles for the last decade. So essentially, it's not like Ruger had massive amounts of research to say, well, I wonder what's wrong with this rifle. They knew what was wrong with this rifle. Here's a little detail I wanted to show you because, again, I'm a cowboy action shooter and have been for years. You see cowboy action levers wrapped in leather, or sometimes for hunting guns, you see them wrapped in paracord. Why is that? Because levers had sharp edges. And so it wasn't unusual to actually cut yourself because in a cowboy match, you want to go fast. You're going as fast as you can. In a hunting situation, say a big game hunting situation, you understand that you're going to have to run this lever just like it was designed to be run. Hard, down, up. Lever guns like blunt trauma. And that left blunt scars on your hand. So the Ruger engineers said, why don't we just buff and round the edges on the lever? Well, that's brilliant. So if you put a leather guide on it, it's because you want it to look cool. Another quick point in the way Ruger chose to build this gun is typically on Marlin barrels, they had a whole series of shims so that when they put the barrel on, where they had drilled for the front sight, where they drilled for the buckhorn sight or cut for the buckhorn sight, it might not line up exactly right with the receiver, but they had all these shims that they would put on it to make it line up right. Well, Ruger fixed that. Ruger's machining is so precise that what they do is they put the barrel on the gun, screw the barrel down, torque it in, and everything is in the correct place. You'll notice here, the bolt itself is nickeled and fluted. Why is that? Because it moves more smoothly within the receiver. It makes for a smoother lever action rifle, which is what all of us who have lever action rifles work toward. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about fit and finish, which I think is very important here. This week's Triggered is brought to you by Volquartsen Firearms. Excellence is essential. Taurus USA. Prepare and protect. Rock Island Armory Arms Corps, home of the STK 100. Welcome back to Triggered, where we're talking about this Marlin 4570 SBL manufactured by Ruger in Myodan, North Carolina, the same place they make their ARs. And I wanted to show you a little bit on fit and finish because for the end user, for you guys, for consumers like me, that's sort of where the rubber meets the road. And I wanted to talk about fit and finish by showing you this gun. This is a 44 Magnum Marlin. Ignore the Picatinny rail, ignore the sights, the front sights, because this gun was rebuilt by Jeremy West at Wild West Guns in Las Vegas. Jeremy, of course, is Jim West's son. Jim West built Colonel Cooper's lever-action rifles, so that should tell you something. But I got this gun at the very worst part of Remington's manufacturing a Marlin. Remington brought all the equipment down from the New Haven plant, but they didn't bring the intellectual knowledge of how to build a gun. Back in the old days when you had this equipment, and I believe the equipment at the Marlin factory dated from World War I, as the equipment wore, there weren't computers where you entered in what had changed. There was instead a wall and a pen, and you would make notes on the wall. I know this is true because I've seen notes on the wall in manufacturing companies. Well, if you just take the machinery and don't take the wall and don't take the operator who's been on it for 30 years, you're going to lose a lot of institutional knowledge, which is what happened to Remington. I bought this gun, and it came with the stock cracked. A big chunk of wood was knocked off the stock, and there was a crack running down it. As Jeremy West said, if they sent you a cracked stock, what would they send me? This is a replacement stock. It's exact duplicate wood. It's really not particularly great. But the other thing I want you to see on the front end of this gun is see how fat that handguard is. That's because they're trying to save a little money here. They were trying to save money, so you're not fitting the wood as precisely. You have a nice loose fit on it, and basically it looks like what it is, which is a chunk of wood that has been moderately machined, moderately carved to fit this gun. You also see fitting issues here at the point where the stock comes against the metal. It's not fitted quite right. It's not fitted quite right anywhere. And that was endemic in Marlins at the very worst from Remington. Now, take a look at the Ruger. You'll notice they have slimmed down this forend. They have fitted it better. The forend tends to flow. Look at the wood to metal on it. It is substantially better, especially if you come back to here. The wood to metal fit is really, really very good. They made some changes also in the tang back here. Sometimes these things happen. They made some changes in the tang and the way they tested the gun. The way Marlin typically tested the gun is they had a dummy stock fixture. They put the gun in, tested it, proofed it, all those things. And then when they put it into its own individual stock and fired it, sometimes they cracked, which is how I got a stock that was cracked. I got a stock that had a piece of wood broken out. Instead, the Ruger engineers said, well, we're going to basically change the tang a little bit, make it a little bit wider, make it a little bit beefier, and all the testing is done with the stock on the gun. So if it's going to break there. It's not going to be broken when you open the box on it. That is kind of another example of how Ruger took this to the next level. Unfortunately, they left the stupid push-button hammer block safety. Oh, God. Some things in life we can never, ever, ever get rid of. This gun holds 6-in-1, which is excellent for a hunting gun. It weighs about 7.5 pounds, which is pretty good, pretty good. The other thing the only thing Ruger didn't fix, that I thought they were going to fix, but they didn't fix, you got kind of the shaky, icky trigger. Typically, the only way to get rid of that is to go to someplace like Wild West, where they fit their happy trigger. I learned about the Marlin happy trigger when I was shooting a Marlin in cowboy action shooting. So the key thing that I felt about this gun in the field was it was quick, which is exactly what you want with a field gun. It swung quickly. Ammunition I was shooting, 325 grain Hornady, that have the FTX ammunition with the little red tip. Why would you have the little red tip on this gun? It's a lever action rifle. See that tip? That's so when you stick these things in, this tip is plastic and will not pop the primer. I've read on the internet that the entire idea of one round setting off an entire tube in a gun is a myth. Having seen a 45 Colt tube blow out, I'm the guy that called the ambulance for the person holding it. It's not a myth, trust me on this. But Hornady solved that problem. These, about 2,000 feet per second, they add about 100 yards to the range of the 45-70. My shot on mule deer, I think my first shot was 150, 170 yards, somewhere like that. So now this is a special two-parter. So we're going to come back next week and we're going to continue talking about this rifle, and I'm going to give you some comparisons, show you some options of what else is out there and how they compare to this Ruger. I'm Michael Bain. You can find us on michaelbain.tv. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Rumble. Check around. You might be able to find us under the cushions of your couch. We'll be back next week.